Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's devotional. Our thought today is going to come from an article that was posted today. It's an opinion piece written by Representative Mike Gallagher. The Chinese Communist Party is rewriting the Bible. It says, Gospel according to Chairman Z has Jesus turned killer instead of forgiving sin. Now, we're not going to read all of this, but there are a few excerpts I want to look at. It reminds me there's some obvious application here, but also reminds me of an event in the Bible as well. He begins this, he says, as part of a push to sinicize religion. Sinicize means to make it more Chinese in character or form, to make it kind of have more of a Chinese type of feel to it, to basically rewrite it for Chinese culture, that type of thing. As part of a push to sinicize religion, the Chinese Communist Party has embarked on a 10-year project to rewrite the Bible and other religious texts. In the Gospel of John, Jesus famously confronts the accusers of a woman caught committing adultery, saying, "Let the one among you who is guiltless be the first to throw a stone at her." The chastened accusers slink away, and Jesus says to the woman, "Has no one condemned you?" She replies, "No one, sir." She replied, "Neither do I condemn you," Jesus says. "Go away, and from this moment sin no more." A beautiful story of forgiveness and mercy. Of course, we could do a whole devotional, a whole lesson on that event and some of the applications from it. But here's what's interesting. Unless you're a CCP official, that's the Chinese Communist Party, then it's a story of a dissident challenging the authority of the state. A possible sneak preview of what a Bible with socialist characteristics might look like appeared in a Chinese university textbook in 2020. The rewritten Gospel of John excerpt ends not with mercy, but with Jesus himself stoning the adulterous woman to death. Across Henan province, local CCP officials forced Protestant churches to replace the Ten Commandments with Xi Jinping quotes, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," which is the first commandment, become diktats like resolutely guard against the infiltration of Western ideology. The 10-year project to rewrite the Bible, the Quran, and other sacred texts is all part of Xi Jinping's quest to make the faithful serve the party rather than God. At the 19th Party Congress, Chairman Xi declared, "We will insist on the sinicization of Chinese religions and provide active guidance for religion and socialism to coexist." Let me translate. Xi Jinping has no problem with the first commandment, just so long as he and the CCP are playing the role of God. He continues to go through, talks about several of the different religions, some of the things that have happened in China, and some of the religious leaders not standing up and speaking out against it, and that sort of thing. But he comes down towards the end of this article, and he makes this statement. He says, even under intense persecution, faith persists throughout China, and the number of faithful grows. In my work in Congress, I've heard unthinkable stories of religious oppression, but I've also listened to accounts of underground churches, brave clergy, and steadfast believers every bit as courageous as saints of the early church. And then he ends this with a quote. He says, in an interview, there we go. In an interview with The Guardian, the pastor of one Chinese church stated, "In this war in Xinjiang in Shanghai, in Beijing in Chengdu, the rulers have chosen an enemy that can never be imprisoned, the soul of man." The pastor ended with the assessment that we must make come true. The PRC rulers are doomed to lose. I think that's an interesting quote. I don't know, again, he doesn't say who this quote-unquote pastor is, but I think that's an interesting point, that they've chosen an enemy that can never be imprisoned, the soul of man. And this whole article is really interesting in the fact that, first of all, it's saddening, obviously, that first of all, individuals in power are seeking to rewrite the Bible. Certainly not really a new effort, but certainly one that has an ultimate goal, which is to seek perhaps to uplift the party rather than God, and have the party be the one people pay attention to rather than God. Also, and in fact, I'm personally aware of churches of Christ in China that have to meet in secret. In when they sing, they have to whisper when they sing, and it's certainly the type of I guess the society, the community in which they live is so different from ours. It's hard to imagine what life would be like as a Christian in that type of situation. That is far closer, as he points out, it's far closer to the first century church type of situation, especially when Saul was on the warpath before he was converted. Certainly, there were times where the Jews were seeking out any Christians, the Roman Empire at times were seeking out Christians. It's very similar in to what the New Testament writers write about in terms of persecution and being faithful. And really, in a lot of ways in the West, especially in America, we can't really comprehend or fully appreciate that type of danger, and still insisting on gathering together with the saints on the Lord's Day, to literally risking your lives every time you gather together. It's something that's very difficult to imagine. But like I said, this brought up a reminder for me from the Bible, and that is in Daniel chapter 3. And we're not going to read the whole account. It would take too long to read the whole account. But we have Nebuchadnezzar's golden image that he sets up, and he declares that everyone is to offer up homage and worship at a certain time. There's a herald that cries aloud in verse 4. To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the golden image the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And so everybody did that. But then Chaldeans come forward to accuse the Jews, and in particular, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, the friends of Daniel. And of course, we don't read about Daniel in this account, but I have no doubt that Daniel refused to bow down either. And so Nebuchadnezzar, he's furious. He brings Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego to him, and he says, "Is it true that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image that I have set up?" And then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego respond, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter," which in of itself is a eye-opening statement to the king. The king has requested an answer, and says, we don't need to answer you. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Now, I don't know how old Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego are at this point. Daniel chapter 1, we know that Daniel and his friends are very young men. We're talking teenagers, perhaps, maybe at the oldest around 16, 17, 18 years old, perhaps no more than that, no more than, I think the oldest estimate that I've ever seen is about 20 years old. So by chapter 3, I don't know how many years have taken place, but they're still young fellas. And for them to be so bold as to say, first of all, God is able to deliver us. Okay. And if he wants to, he's fully capable of delivering us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you. What's interesting is Nebuchadnezzar asks, who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? It was a rhetorical question. They answer, oh, well, our God is fully capable of delivering us from your hand, O king. But even if God chooses to let us die, that's not going to change anything. And Nebuchadnezzar, he's full of fury. He commands that they bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. They throw them into the furnace. And we see that when they look inside, there's 4. He says in verse 25, look, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the form of the fourth is like, it says the Son of God. The translation of this is a little bit weird. It gives you the impression that Jesus is there. The translation here is more like the fourth is like a son of a God, which is the sense of one that is glowing, one that is bright, and it was an angel as far as we know, but Nebuchadnezzar brings Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego out, and he says, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego." He says, "They have frustrated the king's word, yielded their bodies, that they should not serve or worship any god except their own God." And he makes this decree here in verse 29 that they should not speak anything amiss of Jehovah. That's the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. And so he promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego in the province of Babylon. And that whole article regarding the Chinese effort the Chinese Communist Party's effort to change the Bible, or to try to really ultimately be the one who is worshipped, seems like a very similar type of situation. They want to be God. They want to be the number one in the devotion of the hearts of people. And despite all of that, I know for a fact that there are members of the church that belongs to Christ that exist in China and that are no less brave than Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego had the opportunity to actually speak up and say, when they were brought before him, that we will not serve you. And I have no doubt that there have been Christians who have been found out, who have been arrested, possibly thrown in prison, thrown in labor camps, or possibly killed, because they, in essence, say the same thing. I refuse to bow down to you as God. Okay, it's one thing to obey the laws of the land, as long as those laws do not come in conflict with our obeying Jehovah. But when those two are in conflict, whom do we choose? We choose Jehovah. And that's exactly what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego did. That's what many people, and not just in China, but many Christians throughout the world, and when I say Christians, I mean people who are members of the Church of Christ. That's what many people are doing in places in this world where, despite any outward statement, Christianity is not favored and is sometimes actively oppressed and actively persecuted. And it just provides a reminder for us of the depth of conviction, the depth of devotion to Jehovah that these men and many of our brethren in the world have had to display, have had to reach down in their heart, in their mind, in their soul, to ask the question, which is most important? And as that quote-unquote pastor said, you can't, or implied, you can't imprison the soul of man. You can imprison the body, you can attempt to break the mind, but you cannot imprison, you cannot destroy the soul. And the soul of an individual who refuses to bow down to man or to man's creations, that one who seeks to serve God and to do as God has commanded, nothing can touch that one. And this is what Paul basically says in Romans 8, who can separate us from the love of Christ? And Paul goes through this whole list of all the things, of the outward issues, outward maladies that we may face, dilemmas we may face. He says, but I'm persuaded that neither death nor life nor any other created thing can separate us from the love of Christ. And ultimately, when we put our commitment and our trust in Jehovah, we have something that is far greater, far better than what is offered in this world. We have something that will be eternal. No matter how long God allows this world to continue, the CCP will not last forever. Despite their best efforts, everything of man will come to an end. If not in this world, then when the Lord sends Jesus to bring all to judgment. America will end one day. CCP will end one day. All of man's functions, all of man's devices and governments will end one day. And that's when everything will be laid bare and brought to judgment. And those who have been faithful, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, like countless brethren over the last 2,000 years, brethren who are currently being persecuted today, they will be justified. Those who have oppressed them will be condemned. All right, that's the devotional for you today. Lord willing, our next devotional will be tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the last devotional for this week. Thursday and Friday we will not have a devotional, and I'm thinking Monday and Tuesday next week we will not have a devotional either. And then we'll pick back up next Thursday. So we'll have a devotional tomorrow, and then the next devotional after that, and I'll mention this again, will probably be next Thursday. All right, everybody, thank you so much. I hope to see you all tomorrow.